The air in Post 3 Beta was sterilized and thin, carrying the metallic scent of old bureaucratic paperwork. For Elen, the Hearth Watch, a title that designated her as little more than a low-level administrator responsible for logging utility output, it was the smell of her entire future. She stood 6 hours into her final shift before the Great Audit, meticulously polishing the brass plaque that confirmed her post's compliance status. Outside the thick stone walls of the Central District, the Kingdom of Aethel moved according to rigid, codified rules, where every person's worth was calculated, indexed, and perpetually judged. And tonight, the judgment would fall. The Great Audit was not merely an inspection. It was the mechanism that defined all privilege. A high score guaranteed better resources, housing, and, most crucially for a low-born woman whose only inheritance was her diligence, a path out of the perpetual insecurity of the margins. Elen had sacrificed 5 years of her life, sleeping 4 hours a night and declining every social connection, simply to ensure Post 3 Beta was impeccable. She wore her uniform, a sensible, unadorned gray tunic, with a precision that mirrored her ambition. She was 28, unnervingly competent and desperately tired. She knew the nobility viewed the audit as a formality, a rubber stamp on their inherent superiority. But for Elen, it was the only ladder available. Tonight, she would finally be recognized. She ran her hand over the smooth, cold surface of the desk, counting the remaining minutes until the Warden's registry team would sweep through. Everything was perfect. She was perfect. The calm was shattered by the rhythmic, insistent chime of the Level 4 emergency siren, a sound rarely heard, tied only to catastrophic structural failure or major civil disaster. Elen froze, her heart hammering against her ribs, recognizing the spatial data flashing across the central console. District 12, Hillside Terrace, critical instability. Hillside Terrace was built below the unregulated, illegally extended estates of the minor nobles. It was a district vulnerable to the very arrogance the audit supposedly guarded against. The protocol was clear. Log the alert. Notify the appropriate, higher-ranked authority. Remain at post for the audit. But Elen, staring at the flashing red icons representing the trapped residential units, saw only the people she was duty-bound to protect. People the rigid system would deem expendable. Her prepared future, the perfect score, and the 5 years of sacrifice suddenly felt meaningless against the immediate, terrifying reality of the disaster unfolding. If you're already gripped by Elen's desperate choice and the high stakes of the Great Audit, give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily's Heart Tales and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any part of her fight against the system, and let us know in the comments. If you were Elen, would you have stayed for the audit or run to save the family? Now, let's see the immediate consequences of her sacrifice. Chapter 1. Elen's hands, which minutes ago had been smoothing the crease out of an inventory sheet, now hovered over the central console's emergency override. The Level 4 siren was not merely noise. It was a rhythmic, calculated hammer blow against the glass facade of her perfect, prepared future. The console displayed a raw seismic reading and a geotech analysis of Hillside Terrace. A rapid, unstable descent of earth and debris already cutting off 2 primary access routes. The system logged the danger, casualties probable. Her supervisor's voice, cold and synthesized, cut through the alarm from the main network loop. Post 3 Beta, confirm Level 4 alert logged. Action, notify District 4 Search Authority. Do not engage. Maintain readiness for Audit Team ETA 7, scheduled arrival T-45 minutes. It was a test. The system expected adherence. It expected the paperwork to be prioritized. District 4 Search Authority, she knew, was a 3-hour transit away and currently logged as understaffed due to audit preparations. They would arrive only to retrieve bodies. Elen looked around her immaculate post. The polished brass, the perfect stack of compliance forms, the empty, sterile room built to reward adherence. This room represented her only chance at upward mobility, the escape from the crushing weight of being a low-status citizen. If she left, the audit team would arrive, log her post as abandoned during a Level 4 emergency, and her score would be immediately rendered 0. She would be permanently relegated to the outermost margins of Aethel. A new feed blinked on the console, sent from a private, citizen-operated drone. A glimpse through the dust cloud showing a woman screaming, trapped between a broken retaining wall and a collapsing roofline. The visual evidence ripped through the protocols and the ambition that had armored her heart. To prioritize the system over a single life is to admit the system is flawed. The old idealistic credo of the first Hearthwatches, a phrase long since scrubbed from official training manuals, echoed in her mind. With a definitive shaking breath, Elen slammed her hand down on the manual dispatch key. Her own voice, stripped of its usual calm professionalism, went out over the local emergency frequency. Post 3 Beta, overriding District 4 notification. Direct intervention initiated. Requesting immediate ground support mobilization. Closest available units, ignoring rank. She ripped the identification badge from her collar, the one required for the audit, and tossed it onto the desk. Grabbing the compact survival pack stored beneath the console, she was out the door and running into the cold, chaotic night, leaving behind the perfect, quiet room and the death sentence of her entire career. The moment her boots hit the outside gravel, the main console at Post 3 Beta automatically registered her absence. The system logged it with chilling finality. Alert, Post 3 Beta status, changed to unauthorized abandonment, Level 4. Audit score, automatically adjusted to -0. Personnel, Elen, Hearthwatch, flagged for immediate disciplinary review. She was gone, her perfect future dismantled in the time it took to choose a human life over a perfect score. The slope of Hillside Terrace was a chaos of mud, snapped timber, and jagged slabs of illegally laid concrete. Elen arrived moments later, her light administrative pack feeling uselessly small against the scale of the disaster. The screams she'd heard over the console were now raw, panicked cries carried on the cold wind. Only 2 units had responded immediately. A pair of low-ranking municipal medics, shivering and overwhelmed, and a single battered utility loader driven by a grizzled infrastructure technician named Jax. "Hearthwatch? What in the name of the Warden are you doing here?" Jax demanded, jumping down from the loader. His face was streaked with dirt and exhaustion. "Your kind is supposed to be polishing your paperwork for the audit. Go back." "I dispatched the override," Elen said, already pointing toward the most unstable section where a family was pinned. Her voice was steady, authority replacing panic. "District 4 is 3 hours out. You have the loader. Medics, focus on the immediate perimeter stabilization." The municipal medics, young and clearly terrified of challenging an authority they didn't recognize, hesitated. The eldest medic, a woman whose tunic bore the low rank of provisional, finally stepped forward. "Hearthwatch, we don't take orders from you. You report to the people trapped under that rubble," Elen snapped, cutting her off. "I left my post. I failed the audit. I have nothing left to lose, but those people have their lives. Move." The raw, almost desperate honesty in her voice, the admission that she had already sacrificed her future, had an effect stronger than any official badge. It was the authority of utter finality. The medics flinched, exchanged looks, and complied. Elen worked alongside Jax, directing the placement of shoring beams, her knowledge of municipal building codes proving unexpectedly vital. She moved with a cold, desperate efficiency, ignoring the biting wind and the growing strain in her muscles. Every heave of a rock, every triage decision felt like another nail hammered into the coffin of her career. The life she'd planned was dissolving into the mud beneath her feet. After nearly an hour of brutal labor, they successfully extracted the last trapped person, a child, and transferred them to the waiting medics. Just as the immediate danger passed, a sleek, pressurized land car, bearing the official seal of the Upper Civil Authority, arrived. From it emerged Supervisor Van, Elen's direct senior, a man whose entire existence revolved around the audit score and the subtle manipulation of privilege. Van took in the scene. The mud, the damaged equipment, the relieved but clearly low-born family being treated by provisional medics, and Elen, covered in dirt and soot, holding a broken piece of structural rebar. Van's voice was dangerously quiet, his disdain palpable. "Hearthwatch Elen, you abandoned your station during a critical inspection period. You overrode mandated protocol. You involved non-essential personnel in a situation that clearly required professional, calculated assessment. I saved 3 lives, Supervisor," Elen countered, breathing heavily. Van smiled, a thin, vicious expression of pure classist entitlement. "You created a liability, Elen. Protocol would have dictated a controlled recovery, minimizing equipment damage and ensuring your post's integrity. Lives can be replaced. The integrity of the Great Audit cannot. The inspection team logged your status as Negative Zero hours ago. Return to your post. You are immediately relieved of all duties pending disciplinary review." He didn't wait for a response, stepping back into the land car. He had delivered the death blow to her future, confirmed her expulsion, and departed, leaving Elen standing in the mud with the knowledge that the system had judged her sacrifice not as bravery, but as a catastrophic failure. Chapter 2. Elen returned to Post 3 Beta not as the ambitious administrator, but as a liability. The mud on her clothes was more than grime. It was a visible offense against the sterility of the system. She found the post locked down, a thick silver seal bearing the insignia of the Audit Oversight Commission plastered across the door. A digitized notice had been projected onto the exterior wall, visible to every passerby, a public execution of her status. Personnel status update, Elen, Hearthwatch. Rank, terminated. Asset access, revoked, immediate. Housing privilege, revoked, 48-hour eviction edict. Audit score, Negative Zero. Rationing, tier, reclassified to baseline, no exception. The severity was immediate and total. The revocation of housing was the cruelest blow. In Aethel, loss of rank meant instantaneous banishment from the secure zones, forcing her into the overcrowded, unserviced peripheral slums. Elen spent the next 4 hours submitting to the inevitable. She was escorted to the central registry by 2 uniformed officers, their neutral expressions barely masking their pity or contempt, where she endured the bureaucratic execution. The process was overseen by Supervisor Van, who conducted the proceedings in a voice that treated her existence as a tiresome statistical error. "Your heroic tendencies, Elen," Van purred, signing the final termination notice with a flourish, "have proven costly. You disrupted the equilibrium. You prioritized sentiment over the agreed social contract. The noble families whose projects were implicated in that landslide, a term we now officially attribute to unpredictable seismic activity, of course, are demanding full punitive compensation. Your personal assets will be seized to cover the preliminary fines." He slid a heavy, engraved document across the metallic table. It was the formal, disciplinary decree. Elen felt a cold, crushing weight, the realization that the system not only punished her choice, but actively erased the truth she had risked everything for. The landslide was now unpredictable seismic activity, absolving the high-born families. "You risked everything to save 3 people, Van concluded, leaning back, the picture of self-satisfied authority, and in return, you lose everything. Consider it a valuable, if expensive, lesson. Integrity is not a metric the audit is designed to measure." Released back onto the street, Elen carried nothing but her small administrative pack and the knowledge that she was now officially an untouchable, scorned by a society that valued compliance above all else. She was adrift, with 48 hours to vacate her apartment and absolutely nowhere to go. The Warden's Tower, situated at the core of the royal citadel, was a study in cold, efficient power. Here, beneath vaults of steel and enchanted glass, Prince Corvin worked. He was 25, the sole heir and de facto political governor of Aethel, known more for his relentless pragmatism than for any royal warmth. Corvin sat hunched over his primary workstation, illuminated by the ghostly light of complex data streams. His uniform, unlike the decorative clothes of the court, was a simple, practical black, the attire of a man who measured his life by metrics, not sentiment. His current task was the review of all Level 4 disaster filings and disciplinary reports generated during the Great Audit window. He scrolled past a dozen minor infractions before the Hillside Terrace landslide report stopped him. The official filing, signed off by Supervisor Van, was pristine. Cause: unpredictable seismic activity. Response: protocol compliant. Casualties: minimal. A textbook erasure, Corvin muttered to his empty office. He knew the truth of Hillside Terrace. For years, he'd received anonymized intelligence regarding the structural compromises caused by illegal construction undertaken by families protected by the audit's corruption, exactly the corruption he was determined to excise. He pulled the raw, unadulterated ground data feed from the central network. The true picture was starkly different from Van's pristine report. The primary seismic spike was logged after the initial failure, not before. More damningly, an automated cross-reference flagged the 2 minutes of protocol override initiated by a single user. Corvin isolated the override audio. He heard Elen's voice, not the polished, subservient tone of a careerist, but one strained with desperate, raw command. Post 3 beta overriding District 4 notification. Direct intervention initiated. Requesting immediate ground support mobilization, closest available units, ignoring rank. He then viewed the subsequent disciplinary report detailing Elen's instantaneous termination and the unprecedented negative 0 score. Corvin steepled his fingers, staring at the small, grainy photo attached to her file. Elen's face, earnest and slightly tired, taken during her first day as a hearthwatch. The system had judged her a failure. But Corvin saw something else entirely. The audit had failed to measure the one thing it truly feared: integrity, unbound by reward. She had chosen to destroy her own security for the sake of 3 low-born lives, proving that her loyalty was to the spirit of the law, not the letter of the system. She was not a hero. She was a disposable truth-teller, and the system had just made her entirely available. Corvin leaned back, a rare, chillingly precise smile touching his lips. He finally had his uncorrupted asset. He activated his secure comms. Retrieve the file on the former Hearthwatch, Elen. I want her exact location, current status, and a full briefing on all seized assets. And notify my security detail. I will be leaving the Citadel in 1 hour. Unscheduled review. Chapter 3. Elen was already packing the few items the tribunal hadn't seized: a faded blanket, 3 books on architectural history, and a family heirloom compass, when the lights in her small, sterile apartment flickered and died. A moment later, the electronic lock on her door hissed open, overriding her security code. She dropped the compass, recognizing the unmistakable security override signature of the Warden's authority. It was too high level to be the standard security detail collecting her for the disciplinary hearing. This was a personal visit from the highest echelon. Elen turned as a figure stepped into the dim apartment. He was taller and broader than she expected, and though his clothing was practical and unadorned black, it possessed the lethal quality of custom tailoring. Prince Corvin carried himself not with the arrogance of inherited wealth, but with the cold, measured patience of a weapon. He didn't look at her meager belongings. His gaze swept the room with an analyst's speed, registering the precise volume of her impending dispossession. Elen, Corvin stated, his voice low, precise, and utterly devoid of emotion. Former Hearthwatch. Your disciplinary status is -0. You are scheduled for peripheral zone relocation in T-39 hours. Elen, still reeling from the shock of his presence, straightened her spine. I am aware of my status, Your Highness. I don't require a recitation of my crimes. Corvin stepped closer, the silence in the small space tightening around them. He stopped a respectful distance away, not invading her space, but dominating it entirely. The crimes, as you call them, are not why I'm here. I'm here because of the official report on the Hillside Terrace landslide, or, as your supervisor prefers to call it, unpredictable seismic activity. Corvin's tone made the official euphemism sound like a vulgarity. He pulled a small data disk from his pocket, the raw sensor log Elen had triggered. You initiated a Level 4 override. You compromised your post, failed the audit, and destroyed your career to save 3 common citizens whom the system had already written off. Why? Why? Elen repeated, a surge of defiant anger cutting through her fear. Because I was trained that the preservation of life is the primary function of the civil registry, not the preservation of the audit's vanity. Because I saw the drone footage and knew the truth of what happened. Corvin's eyes, dark and assessing, held hers. He wasn't insulted or impressed. He was calculating. The truth, he echoed. The official ruling will not change. You risked everything to confirm the negligence of a minor noble construction project, a fact I already possess in triplicate. You traded 5 years of stability for 4 minutes of useless defiance. The air was thick with the chilling realism of his statement. He was not here to reward her. He was here to evaluate the cost of her integrity. Prince Corvin's eyes narrowed, demanding an explanation that transcended simple heroism. Defiance is useless unless it serves a larger, quantifiable purpose, Elen. I didn't come here to reward sentiment. I came here to utilize competence. You are a loose, uncontrollable variable who has, in one night, proved 2 things. You possess integrity, a quality I cannot purchase, and you have 0 loyalty to the current system, making you the perfect instrument to dismantle it. He stepped toward her worn administrative table, placing the data disk next to her termination notice. The Great Audit is designed to reward conformity and mask incompetence. Your actions confirmed the corruption goes deeper than minor graft. It's a foundational flaw protected by Lord Verrin, my chief advisor, and several high-ranking nobles. Elen stared at him, stunned. You know the names? Why haven't you acted? Because an outright accusation of treason against Verrin would require undeniable, unassailable evidence gathered outside the corrupt system, Corvin explained, the tone utterly mature and political. Evidence they can't simply erase, as they erased your landslide report. I need someone who can navigate the lower registries, someone they won't suspect, and someone who won't be swayed by the system's bribes. He presented his offer, an unromantic, professional contract that felt more brutal than a prison sentence. Here are the terms of our pact. You will join a confidential, unauthorized task force under my direct supervision. Your role will be the Deep Registry investigator. You will utilize your knowledge of the Hearthwatch protocols to find and extract the proof of Verrin's manipulation of the audit. You will be housed, fed, and granted full, temporary immunity from all charges. Elen finally found her voice, sharp and cynical. And in exchange, you get to clean your political house without bloodying your own hands. You use my sacrifice as a scalpel. Precisely, Corvin agreed, the honesty jarring. I use your sacrifice, and you in turn use my power. You gain the access and protection required to prove the truth you risked everything for. This is not a reward, Elen. It is a weaponized partnership. If you succeed, the audit is overhauled and the kingdom, theoretically, becomes more just. If you fail, I will be forced to disavow all knowledge of you, and you will face full treason charges against the crown. He offered his hand, not for a clasp of partnership, but to press a secure, encrypted comlink into her palm. This task force begins in 1 hour, Corvin finished. You have 60 minutes to decide if you are willing to compromise your moral idealism by working with the power structure you despise for the sake of the greater truth. Elen looked from the black comlink to the gold seal of her termination notice, then finally into Corvin's calculating, challenging eyes. He wasn't offering salvation. He was offering a war. I accept, Your Highness, Elen said, her voice shaking but firm. But be aware, I am not loyal to the crown. I am loyal only to the evidence. Perfect, Corvin replied, his first true smile, cold and dangerous, briefly crossing his face. Loyalty is a weakness. We will proceed with the evidence. He turned, his black silhouette framed briefly in the doorway before he disappeared, leaving Elen with the impossible choice and the weight of a secret war. Chapter 4. Elen's transition from a low-level Hearthwatch post to the Warden's citadel, the highest, most secure section of the royal palace, was instantaneous and brutal. 60 minutes after Corvin's departure, a silent, black transport whisked her past security checkpoints where guards, whose own rank exceeded her former supervisors, snapped to attention. She was taken not to the luxurious residential quarters, but to the Warden's secure annex, a minimalist, windowless bunker designed for strategic planning, deep beneath the citadel. The environment was a dizzying contradiction to her former life. Post 3 Beta had been about meticulous adherence to old data. The annex hummed with the silent, cold power of active information warfare. Waiting in the annex's central conference room were 2 figures. 1. Lord Verrin, Corvin's chief advisor, the very man Elen was secretly tasked to investigate. He was middle-aged, impeccably tailored in deep sapphire and gold, possessing the easy, condescending grace of entrenched power. 2. Commander Lyra, Corvin's head of security and logistics, a woman whose rank badges shone with genuine, hard-earned merit. Her expression was ice-cold, assessing Elen as a potential threat and an inexplicable political liability. Prince Corvin stood at the head of the table, his posture demanding immediate attention. Lord Verrin, Commander Lyra, meet Elen. She will be attached to the annex on my direct orders, acting as a low-level data analyst for our audit compliance review task force. Verrin offered a thin, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. A Hearthwatch, Your Highness. I was certain the criteria for this highly sensitive review required personnel of proven loyalty and, well, higher audit scores. He let the word score hang in the air like a cloud of poison, a clear reference to Elen's negative zero status. Her loyalty is to verifiable fact, which is rarer than rank, Corvin replied dismissively, handing Elen a stack of encrypted clearance documents. Verrin, she has an unparalleled working knowledge of the registry's maintenance protocols. She's here to assist Lyra in cross-referencing all ground-level data against our high-level projections. Commander Lyra stepped forward, bypassing Verrin entirely. She wasn't rude, merely ruthlessly professional. Hearthwatch Elen, I run a tight, efficient command. Your former history is irrelevant to me, but your security clearance is unprecedented for your former rank. You will follow my protocol precisely. Do you understand the definition of compartmentalized data access? Yes, Commander, Elen replied, her voice firm despite her rapidly beating heart. I am only authorized to view data relevant to the task assigned, and I am prohibited from cross-referencing outside my chain of command. Good. Now explain to Lord Verrin, who believes the audit is flawless, what the chief methodological weakness of the old Hearthwatch registry system was, specifically regarding resource allocation. Lyra stepped back, creating an intellectual sink-or-swim moment for Elen. Elen met Verrin's superior gaze, drawing upon years of frustrated efficiency. The system was stable but easily gamed, my lord. The maintenance protocols used to score resource needs, such as water purification capacity or infrastructure upkeep, are based on user-submitted projections. The wealthy districts could deliberately underreport their status to keep low scores and avoid costly mandates, while the lower districts, like Hillside Terrace, were forced to overreport to gain basic supplies, inflating their neediness and justifying their low social rank. The audit measured compliance, not necessity. Verrin's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of true annoyance crossed his eyes. A fascinating, if simplistic theory, Hearthwatch. The system is more robust than you assume. Corvin ended the exchange before Verrin could press further. Elen, you report to Lyra. You're to start by reviewing all subsidy applications related to infrastructure upgrading over the last 3 fiscal years. Elen knew instantly. Infrastructure upgrading was the category Verrin's illegally extended noble projects would have exploited. Her secret war had begun, sandwiched between the man she needed to expose and the skeptical commander who held her life in her hands. The days that followed were a blur of intense data analysis within the secure annex. Elen was stripped of her former administrative duties and became, under Corvin's demanding eye, a full-time investigator. The relationship was strictly professional, yet relentlessly personal. Commander Lyra provided the security and the methodology, but Corvin provided the intellectual conflict. He often joined Elen at the terminal, not to supervise, but to engage in a continuous, high-level debate over the kingdom's structural failures. Elen, leveraging her years of frontline frustration, saw the data through the lens of scarcity and human need. "The subsidy system is designed to look efficient, Your Highness," she argued one afternoon, pointing to a spiking graph of municipal repair costs. "But the necessity is fabricated. The wealthy districts use the infrastructure upgrading category to fund decorative projects for their estates, claiming they are improving local infrastructure while deliberately underreporting their true resource needs. This makes their audit score look lean and efficient." Corvin leaned over the terminal, his proximity unusual and potent. His scent was faint, clean, ozone, and metal, a contrast to the dust and paperwork she was used to. "And the poor districts?" he challenged, his voice pragmatic. "They over-report to secure basic supplies. Why not simply under-report like the nobles to appear self-sufficient? Because they cannot afford to under-report." Elen shot back instantly. "If a low-score district reports 0 water pump maintenance needs, the system assumes they are stable and diverts the maintenance team elsewhere. When the pump inevitably fails, they lack the capital to repair it and are flagged for civic instability. The choice is poverty now or disaster later." Corvin was silent for a moment, absorbing her observation. His perspective, born of high strategy and political theory, had never fully accounted for the micro-tyranny of the lower registries. He was forced to see that the system wasn't just corrupt, it was fundamentally classist, rigged to push the poor into a cycle of dependency, thereby justifying their inferior rank. "Your perspective is sharp, Elen," he conceded, a grudging respect entering his tone, "but your compassion remains a liability. If you focus only on the suffering, you miss the systemic choke points." Their debates, often lasting late into the night, were a clash between Elen's moral idealism, compassion and fairness, and Corvin's political pragmatism, efficiency and control. Through this intellectual sparring, a mutual, intense admiration grew. Corvin recognized Elen's intellect wasn't just book knowledge, it was knowledge forged in survival. Elen saw past the cold facade of the prince, recognizing a man desperately trying to save a system he was born to uphold, even if it meant risking his own political future. She focused intently on the data, finally pinpointing a series of suspicious, large-scale, categorized asset transfers. These transfers weren't going to infrastructure, they were going into shell accounts linked to the Audit Oversight Commission. "Your Highness," Elen announced one morning, pointing to a clustered anomaly in the data that she had spent 3 days isolating. "This isn't just about underreporting. These funds, supposedly earmarked for municipal upgrades, are being funneled through a network of proxies tied directly to the commission itself. I believe I have isolated the financial ledger manipulation. The fraud is massive, and it leads directly back to the highest authority." She looked up, meeting Corvin's eye. The data did more than prove Verrin's corruption. It proved he was running a shadow economy through the heart of the kingdom. Chapter 5. Elen felt a cold, calculated fury as she cross-referenced the suspicious fund transfers with the original audit scoring matrix. Corvin had given her the keys to the kingdom, and what she found was not simple theft, it was institutionalized oppression. The massive financial fraud she had isolated wasn't just siphoning money for decoration. It was tied directly to the audit's scoring algorithm. She realized the key flaw. The audit measured potential for self-sufficiency through a complex variable known as capacity index, CI. Low scores meant high dependency on state resources. High scores meant high civic rank. Elen discovered that Lord Verrin had intentionally corrupted the CI algorithm. The algorithm gave massive bonus points to citizens who utilized specific, proprietary, advanced training modules, ATMs. These ATMs were complex, specialized resources required for high-level professions like engineering, advanced medicine, or high finance, and they were housed solely within the most secure, high-status districts. Elen stared at the data on the screen. Access to advanced training modules was gated by an automatic security protocol that required a minimum audit score of 9.0 or higher. "It's not a flaw," Elen whispered, the realization sinking in like lead. "It's a barrier. Any low-born citizen, regardless of talent, could never achieve the 9.0 score needed to access the modules, because the modules themselves were the only way to earn the crucial bonus points required to break the high-level ranking ceiling." The system wasn't meritocratic. It was a closed, self-reinforcing loop of privilege. Verrin hadn't merely stolen funds. He had cemented the noble class's dominance by making true meritocracy mathematically impossible for everyone else. She quickly cross-referenced the shell accounts she had flagged. The money she tracked wasn't paying for the modules themselves. It was paying Verrin's network to maintain the proprietary access lock, ensuring the barrier remained impenetrable. The system, designed to uplift, was now a perfect cage. Elen immediately printed a secure hard-copy data package. This evidence was not just a political scandal. It was the documented foundation of Aethel's corrupt social contract. She secured the data in a hidden sleeve in her tunic. She knew she couldn't risk leaving it in the Annex's networked system. Just as she was finalizing the file, the central Annex security door hissed open. Lord Verrin walked in, ostensibly for an impromptu review of the task force's progress. Verrin smiled warmly, a practiced veneer of concern masking deep suspicion. "Hard at work, Hearthwatch? You've been very thorough with those infrastructure files, perhaps too thorough. I was just reviewing your access logs. Tell me, why were you cross-referencing your data with the proprietary scoring matrices? That is far beyond your mandated compartmentalization." Elen's heart pounded, but her years of bureaucratic training allowed her to keep her expression neutral. "Routine cross-check, my lord. I found a redundancy error in the resource projection formula. I only accessed the primary variables to ensure accuracy." Verrin paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't believe her, but her explanation was technically plausible within the protocol. He simply stood over her, his presence heavy, watching her fingers hover over the terminal. "Good. Accuracy is vital. Carry on. The Warden expects results, not complications." He lingered for a moment too long before finally departing, leaving Elen with the terrifying certainty. Verrin knew she was close, and she was now racing against his next move. Lord Verrin did not wait. The redundancy error Elen mentioned, the only plausible excuse for accessing the proprietary scoring matrices, was too specific to be accidental. Within the hour of leaving the Annex, Verrin had his own technicians run a trace on all recent unauthorized data pulls. He confirmed Elen's true focus, the advanced training module access logs, and the associated fund transfers. Verrin immediately understood the danger. If Elen presented her findings to Corvin, proof that the audit was rigged by design, it would not only expose him, but it would shatter the political equilibrium of the noble houses who benefited from his system. He had to neutralize Elen and simultaneously discredit Corvin's entire task force. He implemented his trap with cold efficiency. First, Verrin fabricated a digital paper trail, using his top-level audit access keys to forge a series of backdated encrypted commands. This trail made it appear that Elen, shortly after gaining her temporary Annex clearance, had attempted to sell the proprietary scoring data to foreign elements known for industrial espionage. His ultimate plan, however, was designed to turn Corvin against Elen. That evening, as Elen was working in the annex, focused on compiling her final physical evidence package, Commander Lyra entered with a look of severe, unreadable authority. "Hearthwatch Elen," Lyra said, her voice a low command. "I have just received a prioritized directive from Lord Verrin, signed and authorized by the Audit Commission. Effective immediately, your temporary annex clearance is revoked. All access keys are nullified." Elen felt a wave of icy panic. Verrin had moved faster than she anticipated. She desperately clutched the hard copy data package hidden beneath her tunic. "Commander, I need 5 more minutes. I have evidence of system-wide fraud that leads directly to—" "Silence!" Lyra snapped. "I don't care about the evidence. I care about protocol. A preliminary review of your recent activity logs shows an unprecedented level of unauthorized access far beyond your mandate. And worse." Lyra stopped, accessing a secure terminal. She projected a holographic image onto the conference table, a damning data transfer log forged perfectly by Verrin, showing a massive block of audit scoring data routed to an unverified external server address. "Lord Verrin's team intercepted this transfer half an hour ago," Lyra explained, her eyes hard. "The transfer was initiated by a proxy terminal linked directly to your active annex credentials. The accusation is that you were attempting to sell proprietary Crown data." Elen stared at the fabrication, a lie so precise it was undeniable. "That is a lie. I have the proof, Commander. Verrin framed me. Proof that you, a former Negative Zero Hearthwatch, have suddenly unearthed corruption that the Prince's own chief advisor missed? Or proof that you are attempting to discredit the task force after failing to extract a ransom?" Lyra countered, summarizing the official narrative perfectly. The door to the annex hissed open, and Prince Corvin entered. His face was a mask of cold fury and calculation, reflecting the gravity of the situation. He did not look at Elen. He looked at the projected transfer log. "Commander Lyra," Corvin commanded, his voice shaking with tightly controlled anger. "Confine Elen. Secure all her physical belongings. I want a full forensic analysis of the compromised terminal, and I want her in an interrogation chamber within the hour." Lyra moved instantly to take Elen into custody. Elen knew this was her final moment. She had to risk everything on the only person who might believe her. "Corvin, wait!" Elen cried, using his given name for the first time, shattering the protocol. "If I wanted to sell the data, I would have sold the proprietary algorithm, Verrin's real asset. I have the physical ledger of the capacity index manipulation. The proof is in my possession, not in his network. Verrin knows the difference." The statement, precise, logical, and based on Verrin's core asset, forced Corvin to pause. He looked up, his eyes finally meeting Ellen's desperate gaze. He had to decide instantly. Trust the documented loyalty of his chief advisor, or the exposed integrity of the woman he had only just begun to respect. Chapter 6. The silence in the annex was broken only by the hum of the secure terminal and the ragged breathing of Elen. Prince Corvin stood rigid, his internal calculations running at impossible speeds. He looked from the forged data log projected by Commander Lyra to Ellen's desperate, truthful eyes. Verrin's fabricated evidence was perfect, a clean digital record of betrayal. But Ellen's defense, "I would have sold the proprietary algorithm, I have the physical ledger of the capacity index manipulation," was a statement of pure, professional logic. Only someone who truly understood the audit's source of power would know the difference between the easily traceable scoring data and the untouchable CI algorithm. Verrin's trap was based on what a common spy would steal. Elen pointed to the core fraud. Corvin made his decision. It was not based on affection, but on evidence. "Commander Lyra," Corvin commanded, his voice sharp and controlled. "Suspend the confinement order. Do not touch Elen. Secure the annex immediately, sealing all active terminals. Lock down the internal network until further notice." Lyra, who valued order above all, was stunned. "Your Highness, the evidence is being fabricated even now." Corvin cut her off, turning his full, cold attention to his chief advisor. "Lord Verrin, Your swift action to report this breach is commendable. However, I want a full, real-time comparison between the data pulled by Elen and the data she claims is in her physical possession. Since she alleges a capacity index manipulation, only you and I possess the master decryption key to access the primary CI ledger. Verrin, who believed Elen's physical ledger was a bluff, smiled tightly. Of course, Your Highness. I will retrieve the key immediately, and we will expose her lie. As Verrin turned toward the annex exit, the only exit, Corvin moved. He activated a silent emergency lockdown, sealing the room. You won't be retrieving anything, Verrin, Corvin stated, stepping between his advisor and the door. The key is currently in my possession, and we will conduct the decryption here now. Elen, produce your evidence. Verrin's composure fractured. The realization that Corvin hadn't trusted him, that the prince had orchestrated this moment to isolate the very source of the corruption, was horrifying. Elen, seizing the opportunity, pulled the thick, secure hard-copy data package from her tunic. She swiftly inserted it into a dedicated forensic reader on the table, bypassing the annex network entirely. Corvin entered the master decryption key. The room's largest screen flickered to life, displaying a direct, uncorrupted comparison. On the left, Verrin's official CI ledger. On the right, Elen's CI data capture. The difference was not subtle. Elen's data clearly showed the systemic bonus points tied to the gated advanced training modules, confirming the rigged loop. The evidence speaks for itself, Verrin, Corvin said, his voice quiet but final. You didn't just misuse the audit. You fundamentally corrupted the social contract of Aethel, ensuring that rank could never be earned, only inherited or purchased through you. Verrin lunged for the terminal in a desperate attempt to wipe the data, but Commander Lyra, loyal to the prince and seeing the unassailable truth of the evidence, blocked him instantly and efficiently. The struggle was brief and decisive. Corvin, you are making a mistake, Verrin spat, struggling against Lyra. The nobles will disavow you. The stability of the kingdom depends on this structure. No, Corvin countered, his gaze hardening into true authority. The stability of the kingdom depends on integrity, and yours, Lord Verrin, has been irrevocably destroyed. He nodded once to Lyra, sealing the immediate fate of his chief advisor. The arrest of Lord Verrin sent seismic shockwaves through the Kingdom of Aethel's political structure. It was an unprecedented act, the Warden of the Seals arresting his own chief advisor on charges of systemic treason against the social contract. Commander Lyra, shaken but now utterly loyal to Corvin, was instrumental in securing the annex and preparing the evidence package. 3 days later, Prince Corvin addressed the Royal Council and the entire kingdom via the centralized broadcast network. He did not couch his words in diplomatic language. He presented Elen's unassailable evidence, the clear, damning proof of the capacity index manipulation and the engineered poverty trap of the advanced training modules. The Great Audit, Corvin announced, his voice devoid of emotion yet resonating with authority, was not a measure of merit, but a barrier of privilege. It was a lie, meticulously maintained by those who benefited from the predictable suffering of the common citizen. He ordered the immediate suspension of the audit's scoring mechanism. The backlash from the high noble houses was swift and vicious, but Corvin had anticipated this. He had the undeniable data, and more importantly, he had a new compelling narrative. He then introduced Elen. No longer the mud-stained hearth watch, she stood beside him, calm, composed, and undeniably powerful. The integrity of this kingdom was saved not by its royalty or its high officials, but by a citizen who chose truth over protocol, Corvin stated. To ensure this corruption can never recur, I am dissolving the position of chief advisor. In its place, I am creating a new office dedicated to systemic honesty, founded on ground-level reality. He looked directly at Elen, the moment marking the ultimate public reward for her sacrifice. By royal decree, Elen, formerly Hearthwatch, is appointed the first steward of integrity. Her mandate is absolute, to oversee the complete structural overhaul of the civil registry, ensuring that competence, not bloodline or bribe, dictates rank and resource allocation. Elen accepted the honor with quiet gravity. Her new position was not a mere title. It gave her the political tools to enact the justice she had once only dreamed of. In the weeks that followed, the relationship between Elen and Corvin deepened past the professional. Their connection, forged in the crucible of intellectual conflict and high-stakes risk, evolved into a rare partnership. They were bound not by a mating ritual or magical pact, but by shared knowledge and mutual purpose. One evening, working late in the now slightly less sterile annex, Corvin watched Elen reviewing the early drafts of the new scoring matrices, fair, equitable, and designed for genuine uplift. "The nobles still call you my conscience," Corvin observed, a hint of something warmer than pragmatism in his voice. Elen smiled, a genuine rare expression. "And they call you the Warden who trusts a negative zero over his own bloodlines. We are liabilities to each other, Your Highness." "Perhaps," Corvin conceded, stepping closer, the last vestiges of the calculating prince dissolving in the presence of his equal. "Or perhaps we are the only two people in Aethel who can truly see the structural weaknesses in the foundation and who are willing to tear them down to build something true." He didn't offer a grand romantic gesture. He offered the continuation of their shared, daunting work, the foundation of their mature, political love. Her choice to save 3 lives had not only cost her everything, but had ultimately gifted her the power to save the entire system. The epilogue. 5 years passed. The upheaval that followed the exposure of the Great Audit's corruption was not swift or simple, but it was irreversible. The initial political turbulence, the outraged resignations, the noble boycotts, and the frantic attempts by the high-born to regain their footing was met with the unyielding, documented truth presented by First Steward Elen. Elen's new system, built on the wreckage of the old, was a complex, self-correcting registry designed to measure genuine competence and need, not purchased privilege. The advanced training modules were decentralized and made accessible based on verified aptitude, shattering the 9.0 access barrier. The funds recovered from Verrin's shadow economy were reinvested into the neglected peripheral districts, sparking a slow, often difficult, but palpable era of reconstruction. Aethel was not yet a perfect meritocracy, but it was finally a just one. Elen, operating from the former secure annex, now renamed the Chamber of Integrity, became the true heart of the kingdom's civil functions. She was known across Aethel not by a title derived from blood, but by her action, the Watch Who Chose. Her relationship with Prince Corvin, now the Crown Prince, had matured into an unbreakable professional and romantic partnership. It was a union built on shared risk, intellectual necessity, and the mutual understanding of systemic pressure. There was no grand ceremony. Their commitment was affirmed in the quiet certainty of their daily work. One clear autumn afternoon, Elen stood with Corvin on the battlements overlooking the capital. Below them, they could see new high-speed transit lines extending into the peripheral zones, replacing the decrepit roads that had once enforced class separation. "The system is running at 78% efficiency this quarter," Corvin noted, leaning against the cold stone, a habitual check of the data. His demeanor was still pragmatic, but the hardness around his eyes had softened into a deep, abiding respect for Elen. "And the social mobility index has increased by 12%, Elen countered, linking her arm through his. "That is the metric that matters, Your Highness. We've proven that integrity is more powerful than inertia." Corvin turned to her, a genuine warm smile finally reaching his eyes. "You taught me that. I inherited a gilded cage. You showed me how to build a usable foundation. You chose a family over the law, and that choice ultimately gave us the leverage to rewrite the law itself." Elen, the woman who risked her entire future for a single selfless act, was now the co-architect of the kingdom's destiny. She looked at the city, no longer seeing a wall of rules, but a living, evolving entity finally capable of rewarding its citizens based on their true worth. The Hearthwatch had become the kingdom's moral compass,